There's like one after the other with emails saying, I didn't think this was possible. We have figured out that our child can absolutely see through our eyes, read our mind, tell us exactly what we're thinking, looking at, reading, and we need help. We need help. We don't understand this. Can you explain why this is happening, what this is? If this is real, if this is true, this could be a game changer just for everything.
Kai Dickens is an award-winning filmmaker and storyteller celebrated for her groundbreaking documentaries. Her most recent project, The Telepathy Tapes, features the remarkable spiritual gifts of the non-speaking autistic population and has taken the world by storm. In this conversation, we explore what she's uncovered in her studies of these amazing abilities and how this could potentially transform our current paradigm and ideas around human potential.
This was so exciting and new to me that it was like, okay, I'm thinking of a number, like, let's go, and then Mia was doing it, like, to the point where I was like, how is this? I mean, it's just so unbelievable the first time you see it. She would look at Mia and ask it in Spanish. And then Mia would take her letterboard and write to me in English. And I was like, how does she know English? And the parents, everyone was like, we don't know. So that was my first flavor of, this is bigger than just telepathy. These are what we call spiritual gifts.
Kai has been collaborating with researchers, teachers, and parents to study these phenomenon. The obvious question many of us have is, how is this possible?
I think there's two things that I have come to. I think one of it is this apraxia, not being as connected to your body. There's also something that happens with the autistic mind where your mind isn't pruning the way that the rest of ours are when they're being developed, meaning all the synapses are in there still working. And I think that deeply impacts how their brain works compared to ours. And part of that might not be having the same dissociative boundary, which is the ego that separates us.
And what's even more wild is that many of the teachers who work with these children are able to communicate with them telepathically as well.
And so what that means is we're all capable of it, right? If these teachers are experiencing it. And most of these teachers aren't going to a silent meditation retreat and unlocking their Zen. They are teachers going to school, working with these individuals every day, and they have linked up, they've connected.
Kai believes that non-speakers are here to help usher in a greater human potential that we've always had.
I would say a lot of non-speakers think that they are here to help us to get to this next level of what it means to be a human. And I don't even think we've all been there. We just forgot who we are, right? I think the Native Americans knew exactly who we were. And one of the things that's come up regularly is let's help them communicate with us better. Can we put goggles on where they look to each letter and it comes up with it, or a neural link in their brain where it will activate the speaker? And their answer around this, that could be a helpful step in the beginning, but you're all kind of missing the point. You need to be working toward telepathy, coming to where we're at, not trying to bring us back down to where you are.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Kai, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you on. I feel like you're becoming your work is becoming celebrity status amongst a lot of my peer group. It's the Telepathy Tapes podcast is, man, so awe-inspiring and so inspirational, really.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk more about what that is, but maybe to start this off, how did this, inquiry and investigation really come onto your radar?
Yeah, I'm by trade a documentary filmmaker, and I was in between projects and looking for my next project. And I had gone through a pretty significant, actually 2 significant deaths of very young people, in my peer group that were taken way too soon, had kids. It's just one of those moments where it's like, what does this all mean? How can this happen? What is this? What is the plan here? Just very, really shaken up, as you are, right? When a young person dies, and especially when it's boom, boom, 2 in a row. And I kind of went through this period where, as a filmmaker, at least for me as a documentary filmmaker, often I want to become an expert on something before I even start, fundraising for it. So I usually, it's like almost sometimes years doing a deep dive, reading, studying, getting into something. And so many of my films were social issue oriented. And that remember saying to the universe at this point, like, whatever I do next, I want it to be something that helps me understand why we're here, where we're going, and what this all means. So that's all I want to do. Because if it's gonna be this many hours, then I want it to be my own spiritual quest as well. And you never really know if the universe answers you or God or whatever you want to call it. And I think it answered, Um, and so I was starting to read a ton of books, everything you could about consciousness, about communication, about everything. I mean, I left no stone unturned. And one of my favorite podcasts during this time was something called The Cosmos and You. And I heard an episode about Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, who discovered through her work on autistic savants that some of them weren't actually savants, but they were seemingly reading through their parents' eyes or reading their parents' mind. And I was listening to this and thinking, what? And then she talked about how she went and tested some of these non-speakers with autism and found that it was true that, at least in her initial testing, that if the parents were looking at something and the child was behind a partition and blindfolded, regardless, they could tell you exactly what their parents just saw, whether it's a random number, a random word, a fake word. And I was like, I'm going to call her up because this is fascinating. If this is real, if this is true, this could be a game changer just for everything. And we had a few wonderful Zoom conversations. And then, awkwardly, I'm like, can I go to Oregon and meet you? And she said yes. And, it's so interesting because so much of this, of course, you need to see it with your eyes and you have to do the test. But the first moment where everything changed for me was I kind of asked her, I was like, can you just open your email and just let me know like the quantity and what comes into you from parents? And it was like one after the other with emails saying, I didn't think this was possible. I thought my wife was not telling the truth. I thought my husband was exaggerating, whatever it was. But we have figured out that our child can absolutely see through our eyes, read our mind, tell us exactly what we're thinking, looking at, reading. And we need help. We need help. We don't understand this. Can you explain why this is happening, what this is? And I just saw this desperation of parents who, are working so hard around the scene, around the clock with a very, a helpless like situation often. And I thought, wow, I mean, if this many parents are doing this. And then so I said, I would love to do my own test to see this. And is there a young person who's, parents have reached out to you that you've not met yet? That felt important. And she said yes. And we found, this family from Mexico that Dr. Diane Powell had never tested. I wanted her to like come to Glendale, like get, be in charge of what Airbnb we picked and where we did the tests and taking the mirrors down and setting it up and buying the iPad that became the random number generator and buying the cues. And I wanted to have full control over it just so I could know that Dr. Powell wasn't like exaggerating this, in any way. Not that, I mean, she has the utmost integrity. She's a full blown amazing researcher, scientist, but still, I just needed my skepticism to be quelled. And those tests were unbelievable. And then from there, she started introducing me to more and more
kids. Can we zoom in on that? Like what happened? And a couple other things I'd like to underscore before we go to that. So, we're specifically, as it seems like we're talking about the autistic non-speaking population. Mm-hmm. And by and large, I mean, these people have been labeled very differently by society.
Yeah. 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 So I thank you for bringing that up. I think this is so important. So before even mentioning telepathy, before, that is like the Trojan horse that gets people interested in this population. But I think the real takeaway from this is the amount of love and sacrifice and care that so many parents are giving to their non-speaking children with autism every day, despite the most like cold and unbelievable odds. Because so many of these parents, when their children is born, and they're diagnosed with what is considered one of the most, severe, like diagnoses for autism. And they're told their child will never understand, will never connect with them, won't communicate, won't comprehend, won't ever be able to learn beyond like a 3 or 4-year-old. None of that is true. Most of the individuals I'm working with have something called apraxia, where you just can't get your body to do what your mind tells you. There is nothing wrong with the intelligence, your wit, your human desires. I mean, all of it is as intact as yours and mine. But imagine your body won't
Mm.
do what your mind wants it to do. And so, because their body is not reacting right, the whole world has just dismissed them. I mean, truly, the education system, the medical system, and often by the grace of, one moment in often some of these parents' lives, they are introduced to spelling, which is a way to get these individuals to speak. And what I mean by that is, language is a fine motor skill. Pointing to letters is a gross motor skill. So if you can't form words with your mouth, which takes all these little muscles and it's very complicated, it really is, but you can point to letters to communicate. I mean, it opens the floodgates. But then these parents hear, oh, well, that's pseudoscience, spelling is invalid. And that is not true at all. And that we talk about this in the podcast, that there's a really sordid history within spelling because facilitated communication, which require touch, and these newer methods don't. But there was some awful court cases where things were brought up in facilitated communication in the 90s that, felt like the partner got it wrong, or you can't trust this communication. And that kind of made the whole thing get thrown out the window. And any of the, ancestor, these newer updates to spelling, which don't require any touch at all, were kind of damned along with facilitated communication. And anyway, so then these parents are told, well, your kid's not actually communicating, even though they're sitting there watching their child point to letters without touch independently. It's just maddening.
And the spelling, just so we have a very clear picture of what this is, it occurs on like an iPad where basically what does it practically look like?
So there's different ways. And, I'd say about 50% of the non-speakers that I have worked with in this project are typing into an iPad, and some of them have like these cool, like plastic dividers that make it easier to touch the letters. One of the young men that spells this way, who I love, his name is Zahari, and he's blind, fully blind. He was adopted out of an orphanage at 8, and I think he was 40 pounds. And he might not even have autism. He was just so neglected. And he, even though he's blind, learned to communicate typing on this letterboard, with these kind of grids that help him. So it's just beautiful. And so a lot of individuals type that way. But how many of them start will be on like a stencil board with like the letters cut out, or just like a laminate alphabet, and usually when you're learning, it will be big, like A, B, C, D, E, F are on one board. So you can really get there, and then as you get new kind of like, pathways in your brain, then you're able to go smaller and smaller and smaller. So for each individual, it's a different course of action. And so often the thing that I learned quickly, which was really unbelievable to me, is so many of the non-speakers, once they are communicating, will say, I can't feel my body. I don't know I have fingers. I don't know where my feet are. I don't know how to enter the body. Like, help me find my body. And that is why in the beginning, it's so helpful to have touch. And so many of the parents explain this, that in the beginning, like you had to let them know where their wrist was or the hand was, even if you just touch it a little bit. And then often you can move up to the elbow and just hold your hand there. And then it's the shoulder, and then often to the head or the tip of the head, and then nothing. And it reminded me of learning to ride a bike. Like my dad would hold me really tight and then he would let go until I was riding by myself. And that's kind of what it is like. And then often.
And these kids, I mean, I think this is a really interesting phenomenon that you just pointed out. So, people think that these kids can't communicate and they don't have control of their body, but only through when they start to spell do parents even become aware of this, that these kids don't even realize they have a body and they don't know how to work with it.
Yeah. And I think the thing too, I just want everyone to imagine what it would feel like to be in your body for your whole life. Some of the non-speakers in my project didn't start to learn to communicate until they were 18, 19, 20, 13. So imagine never being able to say your stomach hurts, you have a headache, you're scared because you're seeing something that maybe someone else isn't looking at or seeing. You're not being treated well in school. You have to go to the bathroom. You don't like crowds. I mean, whatever is going on, you can't talk, and how frustrating that is. And then, as we learn later, also that they're hearing all these thoughts of everyone. And I think one of the most beautiful, again, where it's like when ever someone doubts spelling, I'm like, they just don't know what they're talking about. Because in so many of these cases, I've watched these individuals or heard stories of these individuals, the second they learn to communicate, will help with their own diagnosis. I am seeing quadruple, or I truly can't feel my feet. Can you help me get heavier boots? Or my stomach is in so much pain. Like, you have to stop giving me ketchup and things with sugar or bread. Or like, I need to be gluten free. I mean, there's so many cases of the help with their own diagnosis once they can communicate. That for parents, it's a beautiful breakthrough, and often racked with so much guilt because the parents are told for so often, your child's not in there, they can't be educated. And when you realize they've been educated for 20 years, 15 years, 12 years, like they are 4, and when deep down they love American history, or they want to do complex math or work on plant science, and it's really devastating. But what I have found too is the non-speakers are very much the most, I think, from loving, kind, forgiving, unifying group of people. And it's not like they hold a grudge. It's like, now let's embolden me, there's no pain, there's no help in beating yourself up. That's not going to get us anywhere. Let's, focus forward and get all these people out of their silent prisons now.
Well, I definitely want to go more into that relationship between love and, I guess more expansive capacities for humans, because it is something that's consistent across many different ideas around consciousness. But let's go back to the moment that you were convinced. So you are in Glendale with Dr. Powell. You have this person that has not been tested before. What happened?
Yeah. And I would say, like, the first stuff actually wasn't even at the test. I wanted to take the family out to dinner first that night before, just to get to know them. And then at dinner, it's like, this was so exciting and new to me that it was like, okay, I'm thinking of a number, like, let's go, and then Mia was doing it, like, to the point where I was like, how is this? I mean, it's just so unbelievable the first time you see it. But then the other thing that happened at that dinner that was just so fascinating is I would ask her aunt, the only person there that was an English speaker, a question. Can you ask this to Mia, please? And all of a sudden she would look at Mia and ask it in Spanish. And then Mia would take her letterboard and write to me in English. And I was like, how does she know English? And the parents, everyone was like, we don't know. So
Wow.
that was my first, like, flavor of, this is bigger than just telepathy. That is the tip of the iceberg that gets talked about a lot in the series. And it is true. And how the parents talk about it, which I now come to absolutely believe, is that these are what we call spiritual gifts. This is something that science might not be able to understand or measure with instruments. There's something much more deep and beautiful that comes along with the telepathy, and maybe with apraxia, right? Not being able to be bound to your body, not being in your body, not knowing you have a body. I think that opens up a lot of possibilities.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness: The Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below, and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. It definitely seems like it.
Yeah.
And one of I think what's interesting is, like, you had many repeated examples in this ongoing research that you've done that this is real. So you mentioned this one example, but just to put this in perspective, like, how many non-speakers did you engage with and get some type of verifiable evidence that this is real across creating this documentary and your studies?
Yeah. Hundreds. And this is what's so beautiful. This, to me, because every day you wake up and you're like, this is all real. Like, you have to remind yourself, and you watch the footage, but what's been so wonderful too is, since the podcast has come out, the emails that I'm getting from parents saying, oh my gosh, I heard the telepathy tapes. I didn't know what to make of it. I've always had that intuition because I'd think of where I hid the Halloween candy. My child would find it, or, they seem to know that, my niece was pregnant before she even knew herself. Parents were saying, like, there was always intuition, but then after hearing the podcast, actual telepathy test where I wrote down a number, put it in my pocket, asked my son or my daughter to write it out, and they did it. So I'm getting all these messages from parents, and they're sending videos discovering this about their child. And there's just something so beautiful about that like all these non-speakers are being validated and seen and unlocked. Like unlocking them with spelling, step number one. Like that needs to be a worldwide effort on everyone's part. Like we all know now, let's go. But the number two thing is, I think for a long time, non-speakers didn't feel like people were ready to hear this, or certainly didn't want to share it with their parents or teachers, because just like us, you don't want to share something if someone's not going to believe you or think that you're dangerous or a freak, or that's like scary stuff. So I think, were very intentional about withholding it. And now it's like the cat is out of the bag.
Floodgates have been opened.
And it can't go back in, because for so long, like, gatekeepers in the spelling world, in the educational world, like, and this comes up often in the podcast, people have known this since the earliest mention of facilitated communication. Their parents saying, whoa, can we talk about the telepathy thing? There's a telepathy thing. There's a merging here. There's something going on. That was like bam, bam, bam. People were fired and dismissed and let go and kicked out of groups. If it still comes up at spelling conferences, and the reaction is like, we don't talk about that, or that's just a special interest they have. It's just totally dismissed, ignored, thrown under the rug. And so I think a lot of parents and teachers and principals and therapists were kind of worried. They were worried all along, making this like, Kai, they're going to dismiss you. We're not going to get dismissed. We're going to get censored. And what's been so beautiful about the mainstream response to this podcast, and I found that out from the families this morning. They sent it on a thread, and I think we're all like, tears of joy level together, because the cat is out of the bag. No one can censor it now. No one can gatekeep it. Like, it's known. And their feeling is awesome, and they are thrilled. And it's like, watch out, people, because now that this is out, like, I think a lot of shifts are going to happen.
That's amazing. Are you familiar with the morphic resonance?
Why do I know that? Tell me.
So morphic resonance is this idea that as the collective field of belief shifts and the number of individuals who can do a certain skill change, basically that becomes accessible to everyone. It's like if 50 monkeys in South Africa develop the skill of combing their brother's hair, then like all of a sudden monkeys all over the world through this collective field will be able to comb their brother's hair. And so, the belief around why are these abilities that are available, there's this question with a lot of these kind of cities or latent human capacities, which is, why were they available in other parts of history and not available now? Like, whether that's levitation, whether it's telepathy, whether it's going without food. One of the beliefs is that the collective belief around this potentiality is essentially obstructing any human, or making it much more difficult for any human to access it. And as more evidence comes forth about this is real, the belief shifts, which shifts the accessibility.
Yes.
And even it's just automatic turning on. And so I was very excited about, just this information being popularized, because I've talked to people who, and I've even experienced myself, merging of consciousness, that are not in this population. And it's just this thing that people don't really acknowledge. But the fact that you're putting this out there, I think could really not only shift the belief system around it, but even just make this more accessible for people in this population and even people outside of this population.
Yeah, I think for sure. And even just seeing a little changes that are happening with teachers or therapists that have their, a classroom with like multiple non-speakers. A teacher who's just wonderful told me the other day that now that I know about the past podcast and like these gifts have been confirmed, and their parents also are now listening and know, and she's like, I feel comfortable within the classroom letting the children thought share when we start our day, meaning they can sit around and everything gets quiet as they talk to each other and share thoughts with their minds, not with words, of course. And one of the things she said is, typically one of the things that has become a near and dear soundtrack in my life is often like the noises and grunts of the non-speakers. They have, like I said, again, they have a hard time controlling their mind and body together. So I mean, their bodies. So um, there's often, a lot. It can be very loud, and she's like, in those moments they become dead silent, and they're just all like thought sharing. And then she said the other thing that's been really beautiful is that because now they're aware of the telepathy in the classroom and the kids can talk about it openly, there's been this ability to share things they couldn't have before. And she gave an example that there was one of the young men in her class the other day falls to the ground and is like writhing in tears and pain. And she was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, gets on the ground with him, like, what is going on? What's going on? Well, 4 months ago, he wouldn't have said. And the big mystery, what is going on with this, human being? He wrote, I am hearing from one of my good friends, on the Hill, and he has something very tragic just happened to him. And I'm feeling his pain and his sadness. I'm embodying like his grief and taking some of it onto me to help take it off of him. And there's two things that are so beautiful about that. One is because they feel like free around this now. They can share that with teachers and parents, whereas before they wouldn't have. And there's a greater insight in that. But the other thing I think is that one of the greatest concerns for anyone working closely with this population is loneliness. And of course, there is that loneliness of, I think, even just the families often feeling isolated and cut off to society because so often people are unloving, like, oh, your child might scare my child, or why they're acting like that. That's frustrating our movie experience, or, just unkind, unloving, ungracious. And well, I've just lost my train of thought. But I think beyond, so that has always been this concern of loneliness. However, what we're realizing is, no, yeah, I mean, there's a physical loneliness, but they are very connected to each other in a way that most of us can't access. They have abilities that we have. They're certainly not disabled. They're very differently, super specially abled in a most beautiful way. And through that, there's deep connections, profound, loving connections. And I think that you're right, that we're all capable of if we turn this on, which I think is the next big shift.
This population, maybe we can get into this, seems to understand how reality works from a different perspective. And I know that you have, asked a lot of questions to this population about how they can do this and how this all works. What have you learned from them?
Yeah. Okay, why are these gifts possible, right? I mean, I think there's like two things that I have come to. I think one of it is this apraxia, not being as connected to your body. There's also something that happens with the autistic mind where your mind isn't pruning the way that the rest of ours are when they're being developed, meaning like all the synapses are in there still working. And I think that deeply impacts how their brain works compared to ours. And part of that might not be having the same dissociative boundary, which is like the ego that separates us. So, okay, those are like two kind of maybe physical-ish things, but then there's this third one. And I think it creates this baseline of love in this really profound way where, there's nothing that drives a non-speaking individual who has apraxia or severe autism that would drive us, right? You're never going to have your own career. I mean, hopefully now they will, but let's go back 10 years. I mean, the likelihood of having a career, of being married, of having a family of your own, of having friends of your own, of having money of your own, of having autonomy, of having a car, of having clothes, of having a reputation, of having a riz. I mean, like none of that was possible. So then what? When all that is stripped away, your focus is going to be somewhere different. And I have not met a non-speaker whose focus is love and unity and care and deep, deep care. And I do think, and Julia Mossbridge has talked about this, there's a lot of people who've studied quote unquote psi abilities, PSI, psychic abilities of the brain or whatever, who do think like love is a critical component to bringing those things forth. And so And I have found that with the teachers, if people, no one should listen to this out of order. The onion peels very specifically. And if people stick into episode 5, that was the hardest episode for me to write, in fact, because we left the science credible into a world that was hard to wrap my head around. And I thought I was going to lose everyone. I was like, people are going to turn this off and stop listening. When I revealed that teachers in particular have been able to hear the telepathy back and go in two-way telepathy. And that's been a question. How? And I think it's one is that parents, any parent out there will get this. Like, you have your own ego and stuff on your child, right? Like, the neurotypical child, it's like, oh, my kid isn't doing this at school, or isn't into baseball, and isn't as good at piano, and is blah, blah, blah. Like, we have all of our crap on our kids all the time. It's no different for, so I think that pressure and attachment makes it difficult for sometimes a parent to hear the telepathy back. But also the teachers who are working in the space, I mean, the ones who are really called to do it, are coming to work every day with such intention and love, just having to clear their mind and sit there and focus deeply with such care and intention. And part of spelling is clearing your mind. You have to clear your mind. Now we know why, right? But when you clear your mind and you're just there, something has happened. And they are able, all of a sudden, it's happened with quite a few teachers, actually. Sometimes it's just hearing sounds, letters back. Sometimes it's receiving messages back. Sometimes it's having whole conversations happening in the head where many teachers thought they were losing it and certainly didn't want to tell anyone professionally. And that has been another joy of this podcast going, really worldwide, is receiving so many emails from teachers and speech pathologists and therapists and principals saying, okay, I wasn't crazy. Wow, what a relief. Like, holy cow, can I talk to other teachers who have experienced this? And so what that means is we're all capable of it, right? If these teachers are experiencing it. And most of these teachers aren't like, going to a silent meditation retreat and like unlocking their Zen. They are teachers going to school, working with these individuals every day. And they have linked up, they've connected. So.
Just a quick questions, couple questions on that. So, those teachers, are they only telepathic with the children during the spelling exercises, or is there kind of a persistent connection with the students they work with?
Yeah. So there's 2 teachers I'm thinking of right now where it's very much when they're working, like I think many teachers, what they learn first is, oh, this child prefers for me to ask questions with my mind. I think that's the step 1 for most teachers. And the way they find that out is they might be thinking the question in their mind, and then they'll hear the talker going from the other side of the room with the child answering. Oh, and they'll be like, whoa, boy, okay, they just heard me. So I think that's often where it starts. Okay. And again, these teachers have kept this pretty close to the chest. I'll start teaching you from my mind. So who was the first president? George Washington, across the room. So I think that's kind of how it starts. And then often what seems to be happen, especially when that spelling link happens, is often they'll start to hear the answer back in their mind. And they start to question, wait a second, was that coming from me? Or was that blah, blah, blah? And then it becomes pretty clear when they don't know the answer. They ask a question, but maybe they don't know the answer. It's an open-ended answer. And then they've started to confirm, wait a second, did you say this? Was that from you or me? And usually the response in this very wise, beautiful way is like, trust it, feel it into my heart, allow yourself to merge. So, our response is like, whoa, like what's going on? And their response is like, feel into my heart, merge. And so then there are, at least 6 or 8 teachers I know of that have left school, and especially when surrendering to this truth. And then often we'll hear the individual when they're at home cooking dinner, sometimes to the point where it's like, wait, I got to put up some boundaries here. Like this, I'm with my own family. You have to stop, please. And then there's a few teachers I know of that have really evolved. And I think these people have been working sometimes with the same student now for 25 years. After retirement, they still work with them because the profound connection. And those teachers have really learned to help these individuals like channel through so much information that's coming from what they would call the realms, or another place, collective, the Akashic record, whatever it is. They have so much knowledge coming through, and to try to spell it out on a letterboard is like pushing an elephant through a straw. So the only way to really effectively help them is to create this telepathic link. And what I've seen happen with two teachers, and they're both writing books about it, of course, or have written books, um, is this profound knowledge. And one of the things that I really respect and admire is often they, especially in the beginning, but often when a lot comes through and it seems really out there or different than what they might have been expecting, or even if it's just mundane, they'll say, is this what you meant? This is what I just picked up from you. Is any of this wrong? And the non-speaker will usually engage. You have most of it right, but this is what this meant, or this is what I meant. So it's not like just like this willy-nilly, okay, I got a telepathic download for my student, like, woof, like, this is true. There's always this due diligence. You have to, like, you know, validate it in spelling. And that was like one of the highest levels of cognitive dissonance for me. You know, the first few times I heard this, I didn't know what to believe. I was like, I don't know if I should follow this. Is this like, what's going on here? Is this real, or is this person? But then you hear it again from another teacher in another state who's never met anyone else who's gone through this, and then another one, and then another one in another country, and then another, and none of them know each other. And then I start hearing other teachers on podcasts that aren't even, like, a year ago, I heard a teacher on a podcast that I'd never met in the shadows talking on some, like, you know, spiritual podcast about this just happened. I don't want anyone to know, but I'm a teacher and I have a non-speaking child, and they're capable of telepathy. And not only can I hear them, but they can hear me. And like, she's in the shadows thinking no one in the world has ever heard of such a thing. And she's explaining all the things that I discovered on my own. And I remember sending this to many families being like, yeah, it's like totally like unrelated to all of us. This is just a random person terrified that this is happening to her. And there becomes a point where you just have to realize that we don't know what we're capable of and surrender to this beautiful truth that's unfolding.
I think that's amazing advice. And, you know, there is some really interesting science that feels like it's in the early innings of describing some of this. I don't know if you've looked at the Heart Math Institute at all.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, the heart does seem to be the gateway to the broader field of information beyond space and time. And that's a teaching that exists in the wisdom tradition that I study and many others. And so, you know, this correlation with this sense of unification and love and oneness and these gifts amongst this population, it does line up with some of the things that we do know and have teachings that have persisted across thousands of years.
I do think that, I want to add this point too, because I would say a lot of non-speakers think that they are here to help us to get to this next level of what it means to be a human. And I don't even, it's like we've all been there. We just forgot who we are, right? I think the Native Americans knew exactly who we were. You know, I think the Vikings knew. I think so many groups throughout history understood that these invisible gifts were just part and parcel of the world, of being alive, of being a human. They didn't talk themselves out of it. They honored it. They honored those who had it deeply. And we've just like forgotten about that. You know, we've embraced scientism and like science has all the answers, and it doesn't. So, okay. But with that in mind, I do think that there's this beautiful element too of, again, like since the release of the podcast, there's been some wonderful researchers and scientists reaching out, like, what about this? Or I think I could help with inventing this. And one of the things that's come up regularly is let's help them communicate with us better. Like, can we put goggles on where they look to each letter and it comes up with it, or like a neural link in their brain where it will activate the speaker. And so I just will bring it up to non-speakers that I know, what do you think about this? And would this be a good idea? And their answer around this, at least the ones I've talked to, is like, that could be a helpful step in the beginning, but you're all kind of missing the point. You need to be working toward telepathy,
right?
Coming to where we're at, not trying to bring us back down to where you are. And I'm like,
yeah. Let's not mechanize technology to get information. Let's all, you know, become unified with our consciousness. And what's interesting is, I don't know if you've read, a couple things are coming up for me. One is, have you read The Law of One? Do you know what that is?
I've heard about it. I have not read that one.
It's a channeled work. And I did a podcast with one of the teachers of it, but basically they talk about channeled work from this consciousness in the sixth dimension called Ra, who's around, they're around during the Egyptian time, and the Egyptians worshipped Ra. This is what that was in reference to. And basically they said the fourth dimensional consciousness is a unified one where telepathy is possible. And that is where humans are going. And the path to go there is through the heart and unconditional love.
Yeah.
And, I could it totally lines up that, these are kind of like truth bearers that are helping us see that in a form that kind of, I guess, would be more palatable than just just like random people just being telepathic out of nowhere. It's kind of like, this is a special population that's here to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, like, maybe you could talk about how this group seems to be able to tap into just all information that exists, Akashic records, like what evidence you have of that. And then, like how that might be a way for us to better understand reality through working through these people. I mean, it seems like a very obvious opportunity.
Yeah. And I think people are very excited about this opportunity. And I think the spellers are as well. I think it's opening up. It's just so validating for them, but yeah, I mean, this is, again, and the people should really listen to the podcast in order, because having this conversation and like where we're about to jump to is going to sound absolutely bananas if you haven't heard it all unfold in the way I heard it unfold, because what I'm about to say would have felt impossible and just completely bonkers to me like maybe 2-3 years ago. And now it's just like, oh, this is self-evident, so is that many of the non-speakers have said that they can go somewhere. Some of them, I think, just like any of us, like we have different talents, we have different strengths, different gifts. I'd say in this palette of spiritual gifts, I would say some non-speakers are able to access this realm of information effortlessly at any time. I know some say they just go there at night, or they're taken there at certain times to learn specifically. But like some beautiful examples, for instance, there's a young man, Kyle. Well, he's in England, and he comes up in episode 8, and he never learned to spell because his mom and him had a telepathic link, because he could come to her in dreams, and that was profound and unbelievable. And she was able to validate that over and over again, because he was diagnosing himself, and just all sorts of beautiful stuff happened. And this is coming back to the realms here. Actually, I should just tell this part of the story because it's quite marvelous. When he was, I think, 8 was the first time he came to her in a dream, and she was thinking it was a dream, and he's like, in the morning, they're going to tell you I need antibiotics, but I need probiotics. And he talked about all this stuff, and he was able to communicate with her because he got her, she thinks, into a lucid dream by doing something weird with a playing card. She wasn't like waking into a lucid state, and then he cut it into a snowflake and like looked through it, and it kind of brought her into a lucid state. And then she was like, oh my goodness, Kyle, you're talking, and they had this whole conversation. In the morning, she woke up thinking, well, that was a dream. And then he comes to her with an ace of spades and like holds it by her eye. And that's when she was like, whoa, okay, that happened, which formed this relationship for the rest of her life. But one of the things I love is I think he was around 20. So kind of later in his, like in his life, his mom thought, I'll put Kyle in music therapy. And he starts just playing every instrument there. He can play all of them, and any song. And when they asked Kyle, like, how, he said, oh, I can just go to the realms, I guess, and like kind of download them. Any song, and he's perfect pitch. And he can do that. I mean, his mother has watched him, and when we were shooting the film, like that is something I'm very excited to capture. So how do you explain that? And then Asher, who has a telepathic link with his teacher in England, and he can also, he is a speaker. He had like much more high functioning autism, and later in life he decided not to speak because it's too cumbersome. He'd rather be up here in the telepathy world and not worrying about speaking. It's to brings him down into this like heavier vibration, denser, So but Asher will say that he can go get any information by going to the realm. So ask him anything. You want to know about this? You want to know about that? He'll go get the information and bring it back. And, he's very clear that this 3D life we're living in and these bodies here on this earth are part of what we're doing is gathering more information and putting it into this library, if you will, like so anyone else can access it. Um, and so that's pretty cool. And another thing that a few teachers have told me is that their students have said, "Oh, I'm listening to the telepathy tapes," and they'll go, "Oh, were your parents listening to it?" And they'll say, "No, I just listened to it right when it uploads." And they're thinking, "How?" Like they don't
Wow.
have iPads. Oh, I know they do have iPads, but they're not on like an app like that. They're not on Spotify, let's say, or whatever. So they've been like, how? And they'll even ask the parent, "Oh no, we haven't listened to that at home yet. Like, what is it?" And the teacher will think, "Oh, okay, well, your child is listening," and will comment on it. The children will come in and say, "Oh, this happened," or Houston went here, or this, da da, and like, so she knows they're listening, uh, but how? And so it's a mystery, and it's
It's
beautiful.
yeah, I mean it's remarkable and yeah, where my mind goes is like, are these people able to discern truth that we have not figured out yet? Like for example, like updating the scientific paradigm, like, hey, no need for all the instruments. Here it is. Like this is like already been figured out by something in the universe. Or is it simply accessing what has been collectively exposed, or what any human has kind of, or I guess maybe other intelligence has seen?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important, right, to for them to lead the way here, and for none of us who are trying to work with them to interpret or speak for them without their utter guidance. And because of that, I'm starting with Susie Miller and Diane Powell, a non-speaker advisory board, so they can kind of weigh in on what to do next, just in regard to the feature film that I'm going to direct, about this whole thing, about the foundation we want to create, about the research that can be done, but just about where to take it next. And so we have our first meeting in the next week, and that's going to be wonderful because they have a lot of time in advance to write out their answers. But I have seen just some unbelievable things. That there's a medical research team in Michigan who were given information on a lotion that could help non-speakers clear out the free radicals and aluminum and other things in their body, and it helps repair the gut. And it does all sorts of things that has created like some real huge leaps in terms of comfort and even regulating the body. Like some children who've been using this lotion have started speaking, which is pretty
Wow.
remarkable. And when the two scientists have told me, this young man who told us how to make this lotion went to the Hill to get the information. And the Hill, for people listening, again, you got to listen to the whole thing in order. This will not
It's
make sense.
worth it. Do
Yeah.
it.
But the Hill is about a place that non-speakers said that they can go and hang out. It's like a telepathic channel where they can drop in, tune in, talk to each other, talk to friends, talk to people around the world, share information. It's a very beautiful kind of sacred space that is theirs. And it's again, telepathic chat room. So this young man said he went to the Hill and got the information for this lotion. And what's so beautiful about, again, I think how so many non-speakers think beyond our way of thinking, what he said is, you can't take it as an oral pill because that doesn't hit the right cells. But a lotion hits all these cells all over your body at once. It has more input places for your whole body. I mean, that's such a cool way of thinking and knowledge. But he said it came from the Hill, and it's a medical piece that's working. So we have no idea what's in store for us. This is what I can tell you.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna let the non-speakers, loose on the world here with the scientists and researchers and spiritual leaders and consciousness experts and medical experts, and I think, I think it's going to happen quickly and profoundly, and it's awesome.
That's exciting. I mean, what is your hypothesis for how this unfolds? And then what are you concerned about as well?
I mean, my concern always is just protecting the integrity and safety and the families, of course. I think that's everyone's concern that works with the non-speakers, but I mean, they know what's up. Like they won't let themselves be exploited. And that's the thing, is like people have said, "Are you worried about the government like coming in?" And I'm like, no, because they won't engage in something nefarious or something that has to do with war or weapons or spying. It's a different set of goals in life, I think, for many
Mm.
non-speakers than ours. It's not domination, it's unity. It's not division, it's love. It's not, sticking to these same ideas of ego and control. It's about connecting in a higher plane and pushing ourselves to be in unity with our planet and animals and each other. So I just think, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Halliburton can go try to figure out where oil is, or this could try to do that. They're not going to play unless they want to, and
Mm.
that's their choice. So it's because I trust them. It's so wholly. I know that they just they won't allow for exploitation. That said, I do worry about their safety. And very, very concerned all the time about just making sure the families feel safe, and that I want them out there sharing, showing what they can and want to do to spread this message, to show this beautiful gift, to help others to pursue competence, to get spelling in schools, in a way that feels comfortable for them. So we're in touch all the time. I mean, it's like a big family, I think, and it's just a growing family. And so many of these non-speakers are going to help on this advisory board. I mean, um, and but what's in my orbit next is, I think, for one, is working on this feature documentary film, getting that out there, because first of all, the non-speakers want it out so bad. They've been sending me texts like, make a good deal on your movie, get this out, like, go, let out the miracle. Don't stop pressing, don't stop pushing. And it's like, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to get the movie out. So I know that's important to them, and I think people need to see it. Some people aren't podcast people. And also in the movie, we're going to do Dr. Powell's like test she's wanted to do for 20 years, right? These like Faraday caged, telepathic sending with an airtight controls, and
Mm.
other visiting professors at the University of Virginia. I mean, we're going to finally get those tests done in a way that science will accept. So I'm very excited about that. And then after the maybe like while the movie's kind of getting made, we're starting this advisory board to try to talk about these centers. Originally, I thought, oh, this should be a center that has, academics and non-speakers coming together, and the academics have to learn to spell and have to clear their mind and have to learn to meet the spellers where they're at. And the spellers will therefore be able to like use the knowledge base and this information with these professors to bring forth, create ideas and to help us. That, I think, is all going to happen. The questions right now, and it's again up to the non-speakers, is, okay, how? Like, do we do that as like one big center, or is it like, H&R Block where there's one in like every strip mall,
Yeah.
or do we partner with universities and have every university can have like access to this one beautiful program with their professors? Because the truth is, I think for a lot of parents who are working and stressed and may have other kids, it's not easy to go move with your kid to Sedona, Arizona in a huge lodge for a month, so that's what we're weighing and juggling. And it's a really exciting time to be alive and to be watching this unfold. I'm just so excited for everyone. I don't think people have any clue about what's in store. It's going to go like from here to in the next few years. It's going to
Yeah.
be unbelievable.
I can't wait. I'm very excited. And one of the questions I had is, I know that a lot of this conflicts with kind of the pure physicalist paradigm that we have been living in, but have there been studies on on their brains and what happens when they're communicating telepathically that we could kind of just make sense of it in our current paradigm?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we have done QEEG studies with the telepathy tests that I did in the film. Just really quick. Like Dr. Powell, she's got her own. She wants to do her airtight, awesome university back test. That will be hopefully the validation science needs. When filming the like proof of concept, is this really happening for the film? Like I did my own kind of telepathy test. Sometimes Dr. Powell was there, sometimes not, and in those tests, we put these QEEG caps on with Dr. Jeff Tarrant and got some wonderful readings. And it was so he's written a little bit about that in a book that he wrote out. I think he called it Becoming Psychic. But there's other studies to be done, because what we realized pretty quickly is just scanning one brain isn't enough. We have to do a hyperscan where you see what's happening in both brains, because is it that there's sending going on, or is the information coming into both brains at once? Because what the parents and teachers have so often said is like, this is not just sheer telepathy. It's like child's play to be like, here, I'll send you an image or what. They can do that, no problem. That's like all day long, 100% accurate. Like I will, yes, it's an unbelievable thing. And it's just, okay, that's done. But what seems to be happening is that if a parent is, or at least like Manisha has showed me that if I had a crew member write a word, Akil would start writing it like across the room on the couch. And then if we crossed out that word and started writing another one, in the mere second, like as the word's being written, he'd start doing that, writing that word. So it's like a split instant, which makes you wonder, no message sending is being sent, as would be the case with telepathy. And some parents have wondered, is it like our higher selves are plugging into the same signal and pulling it down together? Or is all consciousness coming in from somewhere else and we're like, boop, like grabbing the same beam? Or is it that our consciousness merges in this beautiful way because the non-speaker is using my neurology, is what many parents have said. And because they're using my eyes, they're using my mind, they're using my ears, like they're able to like access anything happening in my own brain. And I don't have the answers to that. I know Dr. Diane Powell really wants to study that, but I will also tell you that the parents are desperate to understand, all of them.
Of course.
For them, it's a mystery. Like, what the F is going on here? You know, so it's bigger than telepathy. And I can't wait for Dr. Diane to get the funding to do this, you know.
And this brings me to, you know, my last question here is like, since this has come out, like, what's been the general response? And are there people coming forth to support you in a way that you think is needed for this to really go mainstream and become more than, you know, just another podcast?
Yeah. Okay. So the response has been so overwhelming and humbling and beautiful that, like, again, the thread that I'm on with the families, I mean, it's like tears of joy almost every day. And the thing is, like, we didn't have a single dime in funding. Everything was created like pro bono, you know, like just like working on it because it was important. And we didn't have a dime to spend in advertising. We didn't have a dime to spend on TikTok. We didn't have a dime to spend on anything. Like we spent no money. And the fact that this happened virally on its own is what's so great about it. Oh, and it's number one in like podcast documentaries right now on the Apple chart. So what it means to me is that everyone's ready to hear this message. Because if they weren't, it wouldn't be taking off. Like that has to do with the listeners more than anything. I mean, it has to do with the speakers and their message and the parents and I mean, it has to do with the whole cut and caboodle, right? But people are ready, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be saying to their uncle and their friends and their Facebook groups and their list, like, walk, don't run to this podcast. So watch out, Joe Rogan. I'm coming for you.
Well, I love that so much. And I think, yeah, you're 100% right. If this wasn't literally resonating, it wouldn't be spreading.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing to see over the past couple of years, more and more minds open to greater possibility for humanity. And this is just a much more explosive example of that, in my opinion, than a lot of things that we've seen. And so I'm excited to just keep the momentum, for you to keep the momentum going. I know you and everyone working on this will, and yeah, I just encourage everyone listening, please go listen to this podcast. It's truly remarkable. I think you have a website as well where people can watch videos. It'd be great if you could just share more. Telepathytapes.com.
Yeah. So on the telepathytapes.com, I mean, you know, you can join our mailing list. We're going to start doing some live events, like Q&As and that type of thing with Dr. Diane Powell, myself, the families, hopefully other, you know, the researchers and scientists involved. So we'll keep you updated there. You can watch the film trailer where you can see a lot of the like subjects that are in the podcast and doing their tests. You know, there's the test library, which people can go to watch some of these telepathy tests. And that's protected just for the safety of these families. And we don't want their videos all over the internet. So to join that, you have to give in your email and stuff like that. But yeah, so the telepathytapes.com is a great way to engage. And the other thing is on the website, you can listen to all the episodes for free. Like if you don't have Spotify or you don't have podcast, you know, whatever, Apple Podcasts, there's a listen link. So you can just listen the way you would anything on the internet.
Amazing. Well, we'll definitely link all that out to everyone. And there is one more question that's coming up for me that I just really want to squeeze in here.
Mm-hmm.
Have the non-speakers indicated to you or to anyone how this capacity could come online for someone that's not in this population?
Well, it's coming online, right? Because the teachers are doing it and some parents are doing it.
But I guess I'm just differentiating between being able to speak to a like telepathy coming online for me and you right now.
Right.
So, outside of just interfacing with the autistic non-speaking population.
Well, I think that's probably a question everyone wants to know, and I don't know the answer yet, honestly. So I'll ask some of them at a meeting. Yeah, and maybe that's something I do want to do a second season of the podcast just because the response has been so overwhelming, and there's of course now all these beautiful new stories surfacing. So that could be something worth exploring, I think, in the second season. Because another thing I want to explore are some of these, like the most concrete, beautiful, like able to validate cases of other psi abilities in the regular voice using population. So yeah, that's worth exploring. And I don't know the answer.
Well, I'm excited to follow along and see this exploration unfold. Well, thank you so much, Kai. It's so inspiring what you're doing. I'm really hoping everybody listening takes the time to go check out all the resources you mentioned, and we'll link those out. And yeah, just keep up doing the amazing work in the world. It's truly a gift and inspiration.
Thank you, Scott, so much.